as human beings, we are constantly telling stories, right? And often the stories that my clients are telling me are terrible stories. They're like, this happened, that happened, this person did this to me, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so I eventually got so fed up after, that finally I leaned back, I put my hand on my chin. I went, that story's a one. That story sucks.
I'm Marie McQueen, journalist and proud 50-ish woman, and we are here looking for the true truth in perimenopause, menopause, midlife, and beyond.
Opening our minds to other possibilities is not always easy.
Hotflash Inc.
You're all woman to me. All right, Marie.
Today on the podcast, we have Stef Ziev, a New York-based executive life coach who is really funny and has a load of common sense and lots of wisdom. We are here today to talk about her book and her work, The Choice is Yours. For almost 2 decades, Stef was a senior executive in the entertainment industry. She's also studied psychology at the master's level, worked with thousands of successful professionals, and been a guest expert on several programs, including the Today Show on NBC. Stef's goal is to help us navigate this world with conscious choice and empower us to bring more intention to the choices we make so that we have more agency over the results we create. And we talk a lot about perimenopause and menopause and abandoning yourself and caring about yourself enough to choose yourself when everything is pointing in the direction that would be a bad idea, but to really honor the feeling that you get inside. And I hope you enjoy our conversation. I'll just start. We'll talk about all the things.
I love it. Let's talk about all the things.
Okay. So, Stef, your book made me laugh out loud like a hyena. And you were talking first about your Tony Robbins experience, because I've always wondered about Tony Robbins, and then later with the rope exercise. But just off the top, can I just ask you about the Tony Robbins 5 days experience? I have a friend who went and she said it was freezing cold and the days were like 12 hours long and there wasn't even a lot of food to eat. And I'm like, this sounds terrible. You paid $5,000 to go to this thing, didn't you? What's going on with the whole thing?
Listen, I will start off by saying I believe that life is a classroom and that we each have our own curriculum. And my curriculum is that I have a tendency to give my power away. And it is the thing that I continue to pay, not only emotionally and mentally, but financially. And, I'm a pretty strong person. And I really do feel grounded and rooted in my core. And there are certain times in my life, especially, and I'm going to just be honest, around men, that I have tended to give my power away. And so when I went to this Tony Robbins event. It was the Unleash the Power Within event. And I went at a time that I was super vulnerable. My quick story is I was in the television and film industry. I was an executive at a network. I left that job to pursue my dream to be a coach. I did it in 2007, on the end of 2007, 2008. And that was at a time when nobody knew what a coach was, and so I had to, it was not that it was like this popular thing. And I still live in a land where I know it's saturated, but I don't think about it like that. I still think like I have to explain what it is. But what ended up happening was I left and I took my severance. And then within 3 years, I had nothing and I was living in New York and I couldn't afford it. And so I was like, I mean, the irony is I was a life coach and I had failed miserably and I was not in a good place. So in flipping through the channels, I found Tony Robbins talking on QVC, which is never a place that I've ever landed. But it was in that moment that I was I was vulnerable. I was easy to manipulate. I was susceptible to the snake oil salesman. And when I went, and by the time I went to the event, which was several months later, because of course I didn't do any of the products that I bought from him. But when I went, it was so, listen, the truth is I never felt good there. And what's fascinating to me is that I never felt good. To your point about not eating, there is no food offered. So if you don't come with snacks, and there's no break. So you're being told, like, you've got to take care of yourself. You've got to eat. You've got to take a break, because he's not going to stop, because Superman on that stage is literally not taking a bio break. He's not taking a meal break. He is on some other planet for 14 hours being who he is and making us all feel less than, you know. But for the actual fire walk, which is a literal walk on fire, you're walking across a bed of hot rocks and barefoot, by the way. I don't know, for me, I was like, I just didn't think I had a choice. I like literally dismissed myself of choice. I let go of any agency I had over myself. Looking back, the amount of anxiety that I was having, my stomach was in knots. I didn't go to this event with any other person, so I was very alone in the sea of 5,000 people, and I just gave it away. I gave my power away. I thought, if I don't walk on this, I bought into the bullshit that if I don't walk on this fire, I'm never going to get over my fear. I'm never going to, live my dream, all the things. And I gave in. What's fascinating to me is that a few years after this, I think Susan Cain wrote her book, Quiet. And it was all about the power of introverts. I am not an introvert, I'm an extrovert. But she talks in the beginning of the book about how she goes to this Tony Robbins event to basically study the ultimate extrovert and watch what happens. And she didn't even occur to her to walk across the fire. She just was like, I'm going to observe the insanity that's about to occur. She did not even think about walking across. It was like she gave herself a choice. I did not give myself a choice. And thus, that was the inciting incident to, really take some good hard looks at myself and my lack of choice to write this book.
It's crazy. It really resonated with me because I've done that myself. I don't know what it is. Like, I think in my life until recently, I just assumed everyone knew more than I did. Like, I really felt that other people knew better and had more information. And I don't know what it is, but something has happened in my life where I'm like, I think I've done a lot of work. I know you've done a lot of work, but I've just started to think, yeah, I don't know that they do know more than me. I don't know that person hasn't got anything but like a big marketing team. I know so many behind the scenes stories of people that are not doing great, that it's not like, we don't know about him. I mean, he seems like he has it all together, but like, why do you think we give that? Is it from childhood? Like, is it a psychological thing? What made you do it?
I just had another experience, to be honest. I have another book that I could write about the most recent experience of giving my power and more money away.
Okay.
And I feel like this is the last one. This one, I'm pretty sure I turned a corner. But I do think, look, I also think that in the scheme of life, it is a classroom. And, we all have our own syllabi and what we get to learn. But what I think it was that had me give my power away in this case to Tony Robbins. And again, this is like fill in the blank of whatever it is it's been for you, right? So it could be, I've given my power away to men that I've dated. I've given my power away to coaches. I've given my power away to therapists. I've given my power away to anyone who says they know something more than I do, to your point. And I do think that the big lesson and the big opportunity is to come back to center and say, actually, I'm going to acknowledge and take some self-inventory about what I do know. What I do really understand is my own truth, is my intuitive guidance. And I think what in all of those scenarios, what I do think it is that allowed me to give my power away. I do think it comes back to childhood. I do think it comes back to all that stuff. Like I wanted daddy's approval. You're right. I wanted to feel seen. I wanted to feel, accepted. And also I I think also, especially women, I think are told that men know more than us. I mean, in my case, I really have given my power mostly to men. And I do think that is indicative of a societal conditioning. And I don't think it's conscious, but I think it's prevalent. And I think that it does unfortunately impact when we are unconscious, it impacts our choices, right? So my choice was, Tony Robbins has my answer. Tony Robbins is going to fix me. Tony Robbins is going to be the reason that I transform because I don't know where to access this within me at this moment. Had I given myself more time, had I given myself the experience of just like having reflection time and really checking in, I would not have checked out.
Well, you're abandoning yourself and overriding your own desires. Like Tony Robbins may know in generalities what most people do, right? Like you can look at all the studies, but he's not the expert of you or me.
Correct.
And also you just don't want to be the uncool person who's not doing the firewalk. Like I know I am so that. And I've done that in dating too. It's like, I'm cool. I'm not going to give anyone a hard time, right? Like a lot of the time I've abandoned myself has been that.
Yep. And like, to what end?
I mean, it's difficult with these kinds of events because there is a lot that you can get from them. You could put yourself around very, like good people to be around, people, other business people and people who you will, elevate you, I guess. But, I don't know. What would you suggest? Like, do you have clients that do this kind of thing that struggle with this?
No, this is pretty much me. I'll just be honest.
Have you been married?
I have not been married. No.
So you're like, we have a club. Like you're over 50 and you've not been married.
Correct. Yeah.
What do you think? It's an interesting club, right? Like what's the trajectory then? Did you want to get married?
Yes, but I do now in my 50s question if that was a true want or if that was just what society conditioned me to think. Because now I'm watching, I've had friends get married as early as 23 up until they're, 40 something, right? And the 40 somethings will say, I was sold a bill of goods. Which is not to say that they're not happy. I mean, they're funny, right? But there is like, I think I feel like I've watched all my people kind of go through all those stages of life that I said I wanted, but now they're in the actual experience of it, not the Disney rom-com of it. And there is a real difference, obviously, right? Yeah. But I think going back to giving power away and the why of it, I do think that I love what you're saying about the abandoning oneself and why do we do that? And I think it's not to say that my clients don't do that. I think that, and again, I coach a lot of men, but it is the women that I coach, and I'm an executive coach now primarily. So the women that I do work with, it is a fine line between like abandoning themselves and navigating the corporate space, navigating the societal space where it is different. And I was never it's not like I wasn't a feminist, but I never really made this huge differentiation between the way women and men were treated. I mean, we could go through this all day about the difference between women and men, the difference between, different races, different classes, right? There's all that stuff. But there is something about men, in my experience, confidently take up space. Women are very we contort a little more. And I don't want to speak for the collective we, but generally speaking, I think it is we are more sensitive to our surroundings. We are more interested and willing and need to also navigate things in a way that is strategic in some way. And I think for me, that just translated into in doing so, there's a line where it can be crossed to give power away versus still own power, take up space in a way that is authentic, right? Because we don't want to be inauthentic about it, whether we're in a personal relationship or a professional relationship, but the abandonment is real. And I think that that's what's causing a lot of what's happening in our world today. I think women have not taken their power.
Yeah, it's hard. It's funny because I was at a quiz recently. I went to a quiz, like a trivia night years ago, and I hated it because it was all guys that I worked with and they were jerks. They were real jerks. Like I couldn't think of any answers, and when I did, they would just be like, "Are you sure?" And so I didn't go to a quiz for like over 10 years. And then I just went to one and it was all women. And it was awesome. Like, it was awesome. We had such a nice time and we almost won. And then I went back and it was a guy who was manning the controls and it was a completely different experience. I couldn't think of any answers. I felt like very unsure of myself. And I'm like, it's just one guy and two other women and me. What's going on? And I was explaining it to my high school friend and she said, that's so weird. She had a quiz thing for work and she couldn't think of anything. And beside them was a table of women and they did great. Like they won it. And I was thinking what's going on? Because it wasn't like an obvious thing with when the guy was there versus when I was with just a women team. But I remember leaving there going like, that was such a great experience. Like we were competitive, but we were open. And I wonder how much that's been playing out in work. Like, I wonder, I would not have said that I felt ever intimidated by men.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's even, there is an underlying intimidation for sure.
Yeah, I know. And it's interesting. One of the tools that I use, that I talk about in my book, which is kind of like a major theme in my work, and it's going to be, I'm actually doing a TEDx talk in May, and I'm very excited about it. And this is going to be the essence of it, which is it's called Who's Sitting at the Head of the Table, right? And the essence of it is, if we think about within ourselves, if you forget about that, if you think about in life, there's a dining room table or any big conference room or any big table, and around that table is sitting all these different people. And if we think about that, instead of it being all those external people sitting around the table, we get to think about who within us is sitting around the table. So we all have these different parts of us, right? We all have love and fear. We all have happy, sad. We all have confidence, doubt. We all have unworthy, worthy. And we could go on and on. Like the self-abandonment might be there, or perfection might be there, or control might be there. Who might be at your table?
Oh, at mine, perfectionism.
Mitopure ads for January 6th and January 20th. When I was a newspaper editor, I banned all headlines that said, "New Year, New You." We do not need to be any different, in my opinion. Now, renewing ourselves, that's something I can get behind. One way to go about this is Mitopure by Timeline. Mitopure contains the rare postbiotic urothalin A. It works by promoting a process of cellular cleanup that clears out dysfunctional mitochondria. And mitochondria are what power your cells, which are what power you. Mitopure's own testing has shown improvements in energy levels, recovery time, endurance, and more. Timeline is offering 33% off your order of Mitopure while supplies last. Go to timeline.com/hotflash33. That's timeline.com/hotflash33.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we might say, in the spirit of your podcast, perimenopause, menopause, those parts will be there, but it might also be generosity or joy or humor, right? We have all these different parts. We could also think about it like, who were you in your family? You might have been the peacekeeper, or you might have been the black sheep, or you might have been the like the pleaser, right? That's a big one. So, and the question is, in any given moment, who is sitting at the head of your table, right? And whatever part is sitting at the head of our table is the one that is making choices. So if it's unconscious, like, so when I was sitting on my sofa, with Ben and Jerry and gaining a gazillion pounds and having no money and not knowing what to do and flipping through the channels and Tony Robbins comes on, definitely less than, diminished, confused, is sitting at the head of my table. And that is the part of me that then made that choice. When I was walking toward the fire and I was like freaking out and, talking to people around me and being like, this is crazy. And they were like, just do it. And and I also thought that somebody else was going to save me. Right. I thought that the people at the head, people standing at the bed of those rocks were going to say, if you're not in the right mental state, then they're not going to let you walk. Not true. That was not true. But that was very symbolic of me turning to them and yelling, I am not in state. And they were like, go. And I was like, I'm not in state. But that is another symbol of this external world is not going to take care. I need to take care of me. What the part of me that was sitting at the head of that table in that moment was people pleaser, abandonment, fear. It was the fear of, if I don't do this, I will not be, it was perfect child, right? If I don't do this, I won't be perfect. If I'm not perfect, I'm not loved. Like, that's my shit, right? So it's like, am I allowed to swear on this? I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's fine. I love it.
So my part of my like mission in life is to now say, if we are all kind of coming back to center and allowing ourselves to observe without judgment what part of us is sitting at the head of the table, and then we can make a more aligned choice. We can have more agency over what we are deciding to do. And I say, the more intention we bring to the choices we make, the more power we have over the results we create. So if you look at my Tony Robbins walking on fire story, my fear created more fear, right? My self-abandonment created so much more of that. And, and so it's like and then I think about it more on the macro. It's like, who is sitting around all these tables, in our lives? Who's sitting around the table of government? Who's sitting around the table at the UN? Who's sitting around the table at our dinner tables, at game night, and whatever. So if somebody's coming into a conference room for a meeting and they're bringing worry, and then the next person has stress at the head of their table, and the next person has anxiety at the head of their table, and the next person has overwhelm at the head of their table, all of that energy is getting wrapped into one. And that's kind of the energy that then is creating the action steps that are bringing out the results. So if you think like, this is what creates war. This is what creates disconnect. This is what creates rifts. This is what, and we individually have the power to kind of come back to center and consciously choose who we want to be and what we want to bring to ourselves, to our families, to our communities, to our nation, to our world. And it does start with asking yourself who's sitting at the head of the table.
How much of is it about like self-acceptance and self-love? Because you really have to like yourself to withstand what comes with just saying, I'm not doing the fire walk. Because people are going to look at you, and then you're not going to be with the group at the end who did the fire walk, right? You're going to be the weird girl who didn't do it.
Yeah.
You're going to have to really love I don't know. What do you think?
Well, so, in my introduction of the book, so the fire walk was like the first experience. And then I had another classroom present itself. Right. So, in that scenario where I then signed up for a leadership program, because I'm all about the personal and professional development. I'm a walker and a talker. I do my work. But in that scenario, so there, as you know, there was a leadership program. In the leadership program, there was going to be a ropes course. A ropes course is one of those things where there's high and low. You do it with a team. There's a million different elements to it. There's something called a pamper pole, which is where you climb up on what is like a telephone pole, and at the top there's a plate that spins. You have to get yourself up on top of it without holding on to anything. And then for the cherry on top, you jump off of it and grab onto a trapeze thing. And then your people let you down. So you're in a harness and your team is like holding ropes. I mean, that's essentially what the course is. It's a lot of that. So I was very clear, given my firewalk experience, that I was not going to do this. This was several years later that this opportunity came up for me. And so in that moment, at the very beginning of the leadership program, they said, here's the curriculum. Here's what we're going to do. This includes a rope course. Anyone not willing to do anything on here? And I was like, yep, me. And I did have a different part of me at the head of the table, to your point. At this point, I had like the fierce mama bear at the head of the table. Like, I was very, very committed to my choice at that point, that this was a non-starter for me. And I did deal with exactly what you're talking about. So at first the teacher was like, okay, this is not okay. Is this something you would reconsider? I said, no, I will not do the course. And if that keeps me out of this course, then c'est la vie, but I hope that you will consider. She said, all right, well, we'll cross that bridge. And I was like, there will be no bridge to cross. I'm not doing this. And it was a different level of my conviction. I was in my conviction, and
there's no way you're going to wobble. You just were like, it's not going to happen.
I was not going to wobble. I had given my power away before in a way that it was so devastating to me. I wrestled with myself afterwards about and I beat myself up. How could I do this? How could I do this? And this time I saw it clear as day. This was a hard no. So on the day of the ropes course, I got there and I was like, well, I don't know exactly how I'm getting out of this, but the way it was explained is the man said, the guy in charge, he was like, okay, you're going to go up to each element, and everybody, before you do it, you're going to stand there and you're going to say, my name is, and I choose to do this. I choose to do this event. And I was like, thank you. So I stood up in front of every single one and I went, my name is Stef, and I choose not to do this. And then I would do a happy dance and walk away. And friends I did not make that day, but I also thought some people were envious and probably looking at me in a certain awe of what I was choosing. And it was so empowering for me. And despite the fact that I just shared with you that I did just make a really big financial contribution to another life lesson about giving my power away, in that moment, those years ago, I really did also stand in my truth. I allowed everybody's experience to be their own. It rooted me more in my core of my being. It built a self-confidence and a self assuredness. And also it kind of repaired a bit of that self-abandonment from all those years before. I started to integrate my truth, and that really did grow me, and I think it's human and normal that I still had another big fall this year. I did. And I'm going to write about that in my next book, so it's all okay. I feel like it's not one and done. It's a process, right? So I'm in process.
Well, yeah, if you were lifting weights in the gym, it's like you'd be getting stronger and stronger, but then there might be a time when you don't go for a while. I feel like this, standing up for yourself, you get stronger and stronger, but then something comes along that's shiny and you aren't thinking and you're in a weak moment. It happens to me too. I sign up for a lot of courses that I don't take. And I tell myself, this is just like a psychic burden you don't need. And then I'll see one new one and I'll be like, no. Like, this is the one I definitely need. I don't have to do those, I love the part about, your stories of one. Like there was the father that passed away, and he'd always listen to a story and say that story is a 6.
Yeah.
And you're calling it a story. Your story is a 1, which is just the crappy things that run through our heads that many of us don't even think about. I was not aware at all that I had those thoughts. I would have told you I was a really positive person right up until my late 30s when I started like piecing that together. But that's something that a lot of people don't start thinking about until they're in their 40s, right? The fact that they have a lot of negative tapes running through their head. How do you work with people? How do you work with people to shift this? Did you know I also have a Substack? That's just a fancy way of saying I have a newsletter. But listen, it's not like every other newsletter. I am the only journalist in the world who's made menopause my beat. And each week I share research, news, products, tips, and tricks from the world of menopause and midlife. Sometimes I even write an essay. Hotflash Inc. on Substack is where I pull together everything that's here and in the menosphere, and I break it down just for you so that we can try and make sense of it all and figure out what to do together in real time. Join more than 5,000 women practitioners, CEOs, and more, and become a subscriber today. You can get my podcast as well as special video and audio drops you can't get anywhere else. Sign up today at hotflashinc.substack.
Yeah. So the story, if I may just share what you just said, was that unfortunately my friend's father passed away. I didn't know him that well. And at the funeral, his friend Marty gets up and saunters. And that's the only chapter where I actually use real names, because my friend Jessica was like, my father would love it if he was in a book. And so his friend Marty saunters up to the podium and basically says, the thing I'm going to miss most about Pete is at the end of a day of skiing or golfing or just being with everybody, a bunch of us would sit around and inevitably someone would tell a story and Pete would kind of lean back and put his hand on his chin and be like, that story is like a 6. It's all right. Like it could have been better. So I thought that was brilliant. So I decided to use it with my clients. So the second my clients, and again, as human beings, we are constantly telling stories, right? And often the stories that my clients are telling me are terrible stories. They're like, this happened, that happened, this person did this to me, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And so I eventually got so fed up after, that finally I leaned back, I put my hand on my chin. I went, that story's a 1. That story sucks. And then everybody laughs a little bit because they know that I love them and that I'm still loving and kind, right? But I'm also going to be direct and tell them like it is. And what was happening is that these level 1, so I started to call it the level 1 stories. And these are the stories that suck. And when I say that, I mean, literally they suck. I mean, just generally speaking, that they suck. But what I also mean is that they suck our energy. They suck our joy. They suck our time. They suck our value. So if an unconscious story that we might tell ourselves all the time, like I have this one, this is the first one that came to me, and I'm secretly editing it, but I'm just going to be honest. I'll tell you what it is. I have an old level 1 story that if I'm not like, I have to be thin in order to be loved. And menopause really screws with that. I will tell you. Right. And, that is really old conditioning. It is obviously not true. It is complete BS. And yet it is something that unconsciously I will witness it happen in my brain. It's crazy. Right.
Yeah.
So usually
I had it too my whole life. It's like, well, he might like me, but he's not going to like me because of my body. And by the way, I would look back at my body and it was like, great. Like, I don't even know what I was talking about.
Is that nuts? Is that a waste of our precious energy?
My God.
Right? Well, then technically I'm judging it, right? So that's another level 1 story.
Yeah.
And then I'm judging my judgment. That just becomes like a dog chasing its tail. But that's also important to just note. So the point here is to name it, right? If we name the level 1 stories, like another level 1 story is like, think about it like I can't or I don't because, like I can't write that book because I'm not good enough, or I can't write that book because I don't have time, or I can't. Do you have one? Just that
I do, because when I started Hotflash, I'm a journalist. I would say I'm not a business person. I'm a journalist. I'm not a business person. I'm a journalist. So I didn't I didn't monetize. I wasn't confident and to even know how. I'm like, I don't know how, I'm not a business person. And in the last 2 years, I'm like, you know that you can't talk like this. You've got to stop talking like this. You went in
Yes.
the direction of having your own business. So why are you saying that? That's insane.
Right. Right. But
And
even
then
that's insane as a level one story. So it's
okay.
like, right. So we need to just be mindful. So it could be like I can't start the business because I don't know enough. Because I don't know enough. Or I can't, I mean, a lot of it is time. I can't because I don't have enough time, or I'm overwhelmed, or I'm not good enough, or there's a lot of that nonsense that's just spinning. And so the opportunity is not to, it's really to write it down. Like if anyone, wants to just play with this, you can, well, first of all, in my book, at the end of every chapter, there's an exercise. And then there's also a link at the bottom of each page that will take you to you can go to the resource page and online, and you can download every single page of the worksheet. So you can do it yourself. But
Really helpful too. Really helpful worksheets.
thank you. So for the level 1 and the level 10, it's like if you just make a T, and on the left side you write, my level 1 story is I can't or I don't because, which is the challenge, right? And then the level 10 is you change it to I now choose to. So if it's very simple, like I can't because I can't X because I don't have enough time. It's like I now choose to carve out 5 minutes per day to focus on this thing that I know I love and will light me up, right? It's like, it's the second we make the choice, our energy shifts, our molecules shift, our mindset shifts. It is a very different, our words have power. I mean, that's just the bottom line. And if I always say, if you're going to do it or don't do it, choose it. So I often choose not to go to the gym, and I feel so much better than if I were shitting all over myself or making myself bad or wrong for not going to the gym. Right. Yeah. And then oftentimes if I make the choice to not go, I actually will then eventually make the choice to go because I just gave myself permission, and I no longer have this rebellious inside war going on. Right. Because that happened too. So think about what are your level 1 stories and write those down, and then transform them using the statement, I now choose to. And do your best also to think about it in the positive, not I now choose to not think about how little time I have. That's not a good choose to. I now choose to open up my schedule to see the pockets where I am now excited to work on X, Y, and Z, or go to the gym, or fill in the blank.
Well, this is one of the reasons that I worry so much, because a lot of these terrible stories come from outside of us, right? Like our world is throwing them at us all the time about aging, about this or that. I was getting some laser on my face, and I love the woman who does it. And I was talking about being single and saying I'm really happy. And I said, I'm not really dating. And she said, well, I think it's much harder to meet someone. And I was laughing because I was like, no, it's not. Like, honestly, I don't think I could go on Tinder tomorrow and be dating like someone
right.
And probably someone younger and good looking, probably. I know that now, you know what I mean? But I believed it when I was young. And it's like, I'm just not going to believe it anymore. But we get it in all realms. And I really worry about it in the perimenopause space, because I think we already know stress makes it worse. If you're believing like all of what everyone's saying, like this is a deficiency and this is like you're on the path to the disease, and like I just feel like these stories, you're already contending with what's inside your own mind. And if you're then like blaming everything on your hormones, at the same time, it's very challenging. But I worry about that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that again, worry is a form of without being triggering, it's a form of prayer.
A form of what? Of what?
Prayer. You're like putting it out there. It's like, I mean, look, my grandfather, lived to be 95, healthy and awesome, and like worried every day. So in his case, it was like the elixir. But I think generally speaking, there's much more, it is not necessarily good for the soul. And I do think that, look, as long as we can, the statement I use is observe without judgment. So if you can observe without judgment, oh, that's so interesting. I am drinking this bullshit that someone else is feeding me right now, and it doesn't taste good. And so I have a choice, right? It is no joke to be in a constant state of awareness, and that is our opportunity. I think it's impossible to be in a constant state of hyper awareness. So I personally set an alarm on my phone that goes off twice a day that says who's sitting at the head of the table. And I encourage everyone to do this, because what it does is it interrupts any of those level one stories. It interrupts a part of us that's been, that's hijacking the head of the table. I think about the head of the table also like that the person who's sitting at the head of the table within ourselves. And it's important that you name it, not just as like, well, I'm sitting at the head of the table. It's more, no, calm is sitting at the head of the table, or judge is sitting at the head of the table, or less than is sitting at the head of the table. And inevitably that authority that's sitting at the head of the table, the word inside of authority is author. And that's the author of the level 1 stories, or the level 10 story, depending on who's sitting there. So it is very, very important to delineate what is somebody else's story, what have I internalized, what have I now made my own story, and what do I need to do to transform that story. And so it is not necessarily for the faint of heart, this life of awareness, right? I mean, there is something to ignorance is bliss, and let's just go on and live in our victimhood and all the things. But that's not necessarily ultimately going to feel good. And so I do think that it is a constant coming back to center, aligning with your highest and best part within, and really being in a healthy conversation, interaction, relationship with that part of ourselves, to say, like, what am I really willing to take on? Like, what am I really willing to ingest here? And what do I really want? And I agree with you. I think there's so much about, like, everyone will say the same thing. It's so hard to date in New York. I'm like, you know what? I've lived in Philadelphia. I've lived in Los Angeles. I've lived in New York. The only consistent thing there is me. I get to look at me. If there is something I want to shift, I will do it. I will never blame it on the cities that I live in, ever.
Yeah. People always blame the city. Always, always, always.
Oh.
It's really funny.
Nope. That is a collective limiting belief.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that you start to deteriorate when you get older as another collective limiting belief.
Yes.
Even something like, when I hear people saying like, oh, my knees, it's just wear and tear, this knee's going. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know. It's good for your knees to hear you talking like that.
Exactly. It's a level 1 story.
It's a level 1 story. I love it. Okay. What about, you must have some women who are really going through it. Like, so much happens when you get in your 40s and 50s. I have some friends who are just getting like crunched from all sides. Like the hits just keep coming, and the stress. Like, when you're in that kind of like almost crisis where you don't know what end is up, what's your sort of common sense approach for what to do next?
I mean, I think that, to your point about, just the physicality of menopause and perimenopause, and, it's interesting because I am post menopause, but I am also on HRT. So I kind of feel good.
Yeah.
Like I still carry a fan wherever I go, but I haven't used it. Last night,
but you're feeling good. Like you're through it. You're feeling good. You took hormone therapy. You're taking hormone therapy.
I am taking it. Yes.
Yeah.
And and I started with the transdermal, just like the compounded version. And I just switched to the patch actually this week. And, but the weight gain is no joke. And that is my big issue right now. That's like, I feel like my body is like on its own schedule. I'm like, what's happening?
We get it. You just really, it's like anything will put on weight. I feel like I'm not on hormone therapy, and I'm postmenopausal as well. And I feel good, but I really have to be careful. Like it's a very, yeah, it's a bit of a Spartan life, you know? Like I really have to be quite careful. And
I
I
feel
still can gain weight if I'm not even doing it. Like I'm saying like I'm careful and then I might have like a cookie on Tuesday and I put on weight from it.
Me
Like it feels like
it's unbelievable.
Hmm.
No, I think I might be succumbing to the drug industry for health. I am like I am like a no Botox person. I am a no, like I'm pretty fiercely like not into anything. And except I did the hormone therapy. I did start.
Were you struggling a lot?
I was, yes. I started struggling when on my 48th birthday. I'm going to be 55 in February. So on my 48th birthday, I was in Los Angeles visiting my best friend. She had a huge party planned for me that night, and I had a great day planned, and I started off at a breakfast with my cousins, and I couldn't stop crying. I just was crying. I couldn't stop. It was like generations of stuff coming out of me. I was like, I don't even know what started this. I felt, and I didn't stop for like a week. And I finally, I went on some Lexapro, and I feel like that was the first game changer for me. And it took a lot for me to go on it because I'm a coach and I can't, who am I to do this? And I have it together, and I did not have it together. And I didn't even, and I mean, I did talk to my gynecologist and a psychiatrist about the drug. And the gynecologist said she would have recommended that I go on the Lexapro to start. That was exactly what she said. And I am grateful that I was on that and still am on it throughout menopause, because I'm watching my sister go through everything and she can't take anything, and she is really in it, and it is upsetting.
Very raw. And I get very annoyed, because my platform's like, just recognize all of it. You can go through, you don't need hormone therapy to get to be an old lady, but you might need and want it to get through the symptoms. But I get really annoyed because, there's this very like conscious, when we use words like awareness and consciousness and if you're healthy, that you won't have menopause symptoms and you won't need hormone therapy. And that drives me really nuts, that there's like this sort of like, even like you said, I'm this and that, but I still took hormone therapy, right? Well, of course. What difference does it make?
Well, no, I'm this and that, and I took Lexapro.
Oh, Lexapro. Okay.
But I did resist hormone therapy. And then I eventually was like, I started to just do more research, and I decided it was right for me. And I have had, thank God, a good response to it.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. Awesome. And you can always microdose. I hear a lot about people microdosing those drugs for weight loss. And
you're saying for like the Ozempic and that stuff. Yeah. That's new too. Yes, I know.
Yeah. I'm interested in that over, I don't know. It'd just be interesting to see what went on. Okay. Yeah. Well, your work is you really resonated with me, and I really liked your book, and I'm excited about your TEDx talk. And what are you up to next? Like, where can people find you, and what's coming next?
Well, I can tell you, this is like that. I'm at the very beginning stages, but just for fun, I'll tell you that my next book I'm writing, and it's kind of along some of what we were saying. This has a big expletive in it. Is it okay? It's okay. So my new book is called Fuck You, Thank You: How to Turn Outrage into Opportunity. And that book will start with the fact that I signed up for a business mastermind, and it turned into an evangelical cult. So stay tuned. So that's another.
I was going to say mastermind to you earlier because it seemed I'm constantly asking myself, like, don't I need to be in a mastermind? Shouldn't I be in a mastermind? All these people, I could be learning so much from them, but there's just this sort of resistance I have. And then I'm always asking myself, what's the resistance to going in a mastermind?
Listen to yourself. Listen to the resist. Oh, look look what just went off on my phone.
Oh my God. Who's sitting at the head of the table? Who is it? Who is it, Steph?
Honestly, Joy is sitting at the head of my table.
Oh,
I've been loving this conversation. I'm so grateful you asked me to be on the podcast. So
I know.
grateful. So
I'm happy to
joy
be
and gratitude is sitting at the head of the table. But isn't that like, that's like, it's a good interrupter. I didn't.
Yeah, that's great.
I thought it was going to happen during our call, but it's good.
Fine. I mean, it's awesome. It's actually a good example.
But to your point, going back to the resistance, I think that word is really important. I think that if you are feeling resistance about something, it doesn't mean that it's because you're supposed to do the thing that you think, right? That's like the mind fuck. The mind fuck is, and that's what I had. I had resistance to the fire walk. And then I was beating myself up for the feeling was like, oh my God, I don't want to do this. But instead of honoring that part of me and being like, yeah, you don't have to do this. This is insane. I made myself bad and wrong for not wanting to do it. And then I forced myself to do it. And at the end, I really thought I burned my feet. And I didn't. But my experience was that I did. And then I was like, if I had burned my feet, this would have really been horrible. And, and to be honest, I think your resistance is a tell that there is that. And I would listen to that. And I would say that to anyone, that if your intuition is like, this does not feel good, then that is the sign to take a breath and take a break. Ask who's sitting at the head of the table. It might be intuition. It might be real like self-care. But it might be counter to what everyone else is doing. But in my case, like with this evangelical cult, little did I know, but like, why did I sign up for this business mastermind? I've been in business for 17 years. Why did I think that these 35-year-olds could help me? Why did I care? Right? What was I making myself less than about, wrong about, not enough about? And instead, now I'm like back to center being like, I hate the way other people do. I don't want to do it the way they do it. I like the way I do it. If I want to go on social media, I go on social media. If I don't, which I usually don't, I don't. And I'm sick of beating myself up about it. I don't want to be inauthentic. I want to be me. I want to do it my way. And that is when I know my people will also come to me, right? It's not because I'm going to be gross about what I'm giving away or what I'm doing or how I'm selling. It's like, so trust your gut. You don't need anything. And you know what I would say about the mastermind? I would say this to anyone, to me, the best mastermind is when you gather 2 to 4 of your real like people that are very handpicked, and just the 3 to 5 of you are connected in a week, in like a bi-weekly or monthly or whatever event, and then you create your own. What are your wins? What are your challenges? What do you need? What can I support you with? That's it.
This is fabulous. And this is why we need women our age doing stuff like what you're doing. I would never want to hire a coach who was 35. No shade to anyone who's 35, but I want someone who's my age or older. I want that life experience. So it's so great. It's so great. You've given me so I'm so glad that I'm so glad we talked.
Me too. Thanks for reaching out. I'm so grateful.
Thank you so much.
Hotflash Inc. was created and is hosted by Marie McQueen, produced and edited by Sonia Mack. The information contained in this podcast is intended for informational purposes only and is not intended for the purpose of diagnosing, treating, curing, or preventing any disease. Before using any products referenced on the podcast, consult with your healthcare provider, read all labels, and heed all directions and cautions that accompany the products. Information received through the podcast should not be used in place of a consultation or advice from a healthcare provider. If you suspect you have a medical problem, i.e. menopause or anything else, or any healthcare questions, please promptly see your healthcare provider. This podcast, including Marie McQueen and any producers or editors, disclaim any responsibility from any possible adverse effects from the use of any information contained herein. Opinions of guests on this podcast are their own, and the podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about a guest's qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements and advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. This podcast is owned by Hotflash Inc. Media.